I would like to that somebody tell me if the screen appears.
Yes.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Fatima Yahia, a PhD student in education and didactics at the Sidi Mohammed bin Abdellah University in Morocco. This is my third year in PhD studies. I am also a teacher of Earth and Life Sciences in high school. So before starting, I'd like to thank my colleagues, my supervisors, and of course, the ICRES community for their awesome organization and their great communication. So today, I'll present a part of our findings about the evolution of the cells conceptions among Moroccan secondary school learners. For that, my talk will be divided into 4 points. First, the problem statement. Second, the method, where I am going to describe the questionnaire and the sample with used. Third, the main results with their discussion. And finally, a conclusion. So, as we know, the cell is an important concept of biology that has evolved through the history of sciences. This evolution allowed to fight against previous widespread misconceptions about the cell. And of course, this is facilitated by the scientific progress, especially the microscope's progress. The cell is a part of biology, as we know, and some of biological concepts are presented in the Moroccan curricula at the primary school, included in a subject which called scientific basics, and at the middle school and the high school in the earth and life sciences subject. Of course, the degree of lessons and concepts related to the cell increases from one level to the next one. The objective of programming biological lessons according to the official Moroccan curricula is to provide the learner a global view of the main biological concepts. So this is what we have in the program or in the curriculum. So now if we go to the learner at the classroom, when he is in situation of learning biological concepts, especially related to the cell, he will use his own explanatory models that we can also call cell-related conceptions, in order to explain for himself the phenomenon he is studying. So these conceptions could change after this situation, as they could stay unchanged. In both cases, these conceptions could be close to or far from the scientific conception. If they are close, there is no problem. This is already the objective that we've mentioned before. But if the conception is a little bit far from the scientific one, we can also call this kind of conceptions as misconceptions related to the cell, of course, which is our topic. We can have a learning obstacles and learning difficulties. Therefore, we will not achieve the objective we've mentioned before. So to avoid being in such situation, the extraction of conceptions is an important step in the process of teaching and learning. This is already the objective of this research, by trying to understanding and analyze the cell's conceptions and their origins, and trying to define the learning difficulties to avoid any probable learning obstacles. So by considering this introduction or this problem statement, we are trying to answer these two questions. First, what are the learner's conceptions of the cell? Second, is there any evolution of these conceptions through the learner's scholar progress? So to answer these questions, we've used an investigation tool, which is a questionnaire. It was an anonymous one offered in Morocco in classical Arabic. It was also validated and tested before it's used, and the analysis of the data sets were processed by using the SPSS and the R program for Windows. The sample is consisting of 177 learners belonging to 4 levels. So we have 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. So there are the levels of the middle school, and 10th grade, which is the first level of high school. We've got a sample where the 8th grade learners are the most representative compared to the other levels. Turning now to the results and discussion section, where I'm going to present or to provide the results of only 4 questions, knowing that the questionnaire includes 10 questions. So the first question was about asking the learners to define the cell. This question was an open one. So we've tried to categorize the received definitions into categories according to the definition's content. Thus, we've got 8 categories. They are components, structural unity, size, location, shape, cell tissue, microorganism, and diagram. What does it mean? It means that if the learner gives a definition of the cell by considering only its components, we are going to belong his definition to the first category. Same for the other categories. If he is describing the cell by considering its shape, so the definition will be belonging to this category, etc. So here we have the word cloud of each grade. As we can see, the 7th grade learners used a lot the term of structural unit in their definition. Compared to the other categories. And of course, there is a lot of learners that they couldn't or they didn't provide any definition for the cell in the questionnaire. While those of the 8th grade define the cell especially by using the category size. So they are trying to describe the cell size, and also there is a lot of learners that they couldn't define the cell. And as we can see in this word cloud, we have the a lot of categories that appears because the 8th grade learners gave a lot of definitions and variety of definitions, so that we have in their word cloud the appearance of a lot of categories. For the 9th grade, most of the learners didn't answer already this question, and for those who answer it, it means they gave a definition, they use the 4 categories. It means they try to describe the cell according to its shape or its location or its size, or by consider it as the structural unit of the organism. While the 10th grade learners define mostly the cell by its components. And as we can see, they are using definitions that belongs to less categories compared to the 3 other levels. So we can say that the 10th grade learners were able to define the cell more precisely by indicating its main characteristics. It means its components, size, sorry. And this is likely because they have already studied several types of cell, because as we can see here in the image, this is an example of microscopic observations that appears in the textbook of the 9th grade, which is the previous year of the 10th grade for these learners. So we can see this example or other examples that present several type of cells belonging to several systems, the immune one or any other system. So they are more, so the 10th grade learners were more able to define correctly the cell. In the second question, we gave the learners some sentences relating to some functions and characteristics of the cell, and we asked them to determine whether they are true or false. So I'm going to provide the results of 3 cells, functions, and characteristics. The true choices represented or are represented with green, and false choices are with gray. So I start with the first function, which is cellular communication. So as we can see here, most of 7th, 8th, and 9th grade consider that cell doesn't communicate with other cells. So for the cellular respiration, most of learners from the 4 levels see that the cell doesn't have as a function the cellular respiration. But we have many of them who doesn't consider that the cellular respiration, it's not a function, even if there is some of them or most of them. So sorry, I think that I said the sentence with a wrong order. So what I want to say is that most of learners consider that the cellular respiration is one function of the cell, but there is also some important percentages of learners among or belonging to the 8th grade and the 9th grade who consider that the cellular respiration is not a function of the cell. Either most of 8th learners and 8th grade learners and 9th grade learners see that the cell is an element which is presented in 2 dimensions. It means it's not an element which is in 3 dimensions. But we see that the 7th grade learners and the 10th grade learners see the opposite. It means they consider that the cell is not something or an element which is in 2 dimensions or in 2D. So, as a conclusion for this question, we can say that cellular respiration and cellular communication is not considered as cellular function by many learners belonging to the different 4 levels. It means that these learners see that the cell has to have the same mechanisms and tools available for the body, and especially the human body, to communicate and breathe. So they are trying to explain these functions by using their own bodies. It means if a cell wanna have cellular respiration as a function, it has to have lungs, it has to have nose, or for communication, it has to have mouth, it has to have a voice, etc. So this conception is what we call the anthropomorphism. So what does it mean? It means that learners lend the cell and its functions a human behavior, therefore designing in their conceptions an image of the cell as a human being. So as I've said, they are trying to explain these functions through their bodies, through their own bodies. So this phenomenon is one of the explanatory models used by learners to explain cell functions that they still ignore because they didn't study the mechanism or the details of how does the cell execute a cellular respiration phenomena, the same thing for the communication. Also, most of learners see that the cell is not a 3D element because the majority of cell images in textbooks that the Moroccan school use to teach biology, it means in the subject Earth and Life Sciences, are in 2D. This is why we can call the rule of the textbook designers that have to integrate 3D models in their textbooks to avoid building into the learner's head some misconceptions related to the dimensions of the cell. So this is the last part of the result and discussion. I am presenting here the results of two questions. So the first one asked the learners to draw a tissue by using a proposed cell. So this is the proposed cell that we give to the learners, and we ask them to build by drawing a tissue using this cell. The second one, it's also about drawing, but this time we ask the learners to draw an animal or a plant cell by giving or by providing its legend. So here we have some examples of the drawings collected from the seventh grade learners. As we can see, some of them have the right conception that a tissue is a set of cells, so like this drawing or this one. Others no, so they have invented another conception of the tissue. About the cell, so about the cell drawing, they try to draw a complete cell, either an animal or a plant cell, by giving or by providing its legend. So here we have examples of animal cells, and here we have an example of plant cells. Of course, we are not looking for judging if the legend is correct or if the draw is completely or scientifically correct, but we are just trying to extract how does a learner think or can he represent a cell and a tissue. So for the eighth grade learners, we have the same thing is observed in the eighth grade learners drawings for the cell tissue or for the cell. But here for the cell, so they invented also other shapes, and they even give some drawings without caption. On the other hand, for the ninth grade learners, they don't show or they didn't show through their tissue drawing that a tissue is a set of cells. So they've just reproduced the proposed cell that we gave them, either by respecting its appearance or by changing it. And for the cell drawings they provide, they are not captioned, and if we wanna say, they've just copy the proposed cell that we give in the other question. While the 10th grade learners draw complete cells and tissue with a set of cells, so their drawings were more mature, were more completed compared to the drawings of or provided by the other learners. In fact, when we programmed this question into our questionnaire, we've got an expectation. to find at least some drawings, especially those of the 10th grade learners, that contained such other things than the cell, like the blood vessels or binding membrane structure, as an index that the cells in a tissue function in relation to each other and in relation to other components of the body. So this is reflects that the learner's conceptions are constructed in a separated way, and the new concepts that they study are not integrated into their frame of knowledge. So that's why they didn't show us through their drawings these details that give us an idea about how do they look at a cell into a tissue or an individual cell. So as a conclusion, we can say that the learners in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade share conceptions that were far from the correct scientific ones. So as I've mentioned before in this presentation, because of the limited time of the presentation, we've just provide or present the results of 4 questions. It means that there are other results that allowed us to give such conclusion. While those of the 10th grade have more mature conceptions that were very close to the correct scientific ones. So in general, we can say that conceptions relating to the cell evolve through the learner's school career. And we are talking about our sample that took from the 7th grade to the 10th grade, and we've tried to generalize. And of course, this needs other studies that could study these conceptions starting by the primary school and going to the 12th grade. So thank you for your attention.